What's up, service industry friends? So, title is why I have an advantage over most of you guys in business. It's probably not what you think, and I actually made this video before. It's about 10 minutes long. I'm going to try to cut it down a little bit. I deleted it because I wasn't quite ready to post it yet, and to be honest, I got a little bit emotional in it, and so I deleted it, and going to repost this one. I think it'll be a little better for me at least. But you know, when I was 1 year old, we'll dive into story time here a little bit. When I was 1 year old, my mom and dad got divorced, and throughout my entire life, my dad really never held a job. He was a painter when I was little, worked for a painting company, and I don't even really remember that much of that job, but he was there for, less than a year, months maybe, right? And then the last job I remember him having is working at a dollar store for under a month. And literally my entire life, that's what I've remembered my dad working, right? And so my dad was a raging alcoholic. My parents got divorced when I was 1, and it was kind of dysfunctional. We lived in a trailer park in Flint, Michigan, which I'm sure all of you guys have heard of Flint, Michigan. And my mom lived in a trailer in there. My dad lived with his mom in a trailer in there. It's a bizarre situation now looking back on it. But long story short, my parents had a lot of access to each other because they lived so close, and it wasn't a good thing. My dad would come vandalize our cars, and came into our house one night with a gun, threatening to kill us because he wanted money for alcohol and was drunk. And I'm not saying all this stuff because my dad wasn't a bad guy, actually. I know that sounds like a bad guy. He made a lot of dumb choices. He was just consumed by an addiction that I realized probably didn't want to fix because it gave him an excuse not to do anything. So, fast forwarding on, growing up, that was kind of my mom was the stable side. My dad was the disaster, unstable side. Kids and, teachers in school, they go around the classroom first day of school, what's your name? How old are you? What do your parents do? And I say, oh, my mom's a nurse, which was true. And then I would lie about the second part, right? And say, well, my dad owns a painting company, because that's all I knew he did when I was little. Was I knew at some point he had painted. I'm not going to say my dad doesn't have a job, so I would lie and say he owns his own painting company. People go, ooh, that's cool. Move on. Up until I graduated high school, I would lie about that. And I didn't, realize how that affected me, right? Going through, I've got some crazy stories. Just the fact that my dad came in with a shotgun one night threatening to kill me and my mom over some money is a pretty crazy story, but that's just one. And so growing up, I was kind of mentally tough. And that's why I think I'm so mentally tough now, is because I grew up that way. And I think that's why I'm also not very emotional. If you ask my wife if I have emotions, she would question whether I do or not. And that's a good and a bad thing in business, right? It's a good thing because you can get through hard times easier. It's a bad thing because sometimes I have a weakness with employees where I don't take crap and I don't feel for them in certain situations where maybe I should, right? That's something I recognize, and so I've implemented people in that position to kind of take that over for me. But kind of getting back to what I was saying is, growing up my whole life, my dad almost died at 13 years old. He was basically on life support. His liver had shut down from, basically drinking too much, and we were told that he was going to die and he had days left to live. And by the grace of God, everything started working again just out of nowhere, and literally came back to normal. And they said, listen, we don't know how that happened, but there's a good chance you're not gonna make it very long. This is probably gonna relapse. So that was when I was 13 years old. And so kind of growing up, where I was like, man, when is dad gonna kick the bucket? Well, just kept drinking every single day. It was fine. It was bizarre. Fast forward 2013, Thanksgiving morning, 6 a.m., I get a phone call. It's from my uncle. And I'm sleeping, right? Thanksgiving morning, I'm sleeping. I get a phone call from my uncle. I remember just kind of drowsy, reaching over, checking my phone, seeing that 6 a.m., seeing it's my Uncle Barry, who's my dad's brother. And I woke up instantly. You ever get like that panic where it's almost like an adrenaline rush, a stomach, just a gut-wrenching feeling in your stomach, like you just know something's up, something's wrong, something just happened, something unexpected. I got that feeling. Because growing up, my brother and I always said, like, one day we're just going to get a call, something happened to Dad. Like, we just knew. Like, literally, so as far as I can, like, long back as I can remember, we were always saying that, like, man, one day we're just going to get a phone call that Dad died. And I got that phone call at 6 a.m., and I'm like, first off, it's not normal for my Uncle Barry to call me at 6 a.m. because he was just like my dad. He didn't work, always slept in, and he was calling for my grandma's phone number. I didn't answer the phone that morning, because I knew what I was going to hear, and I didn't want to hear it. And so it went to voicemail. Voicemail said, "Hey, this is your uncle. I need you to call me back right away." I called my brother, who lived in Texas at the time, and he answers. He says, "Hello?" I said, "Did you get a call?" He said, "Yes, I'll deal with it, and I'll call you back." We just knew. You know what I mean? You ever just know, like, and he's my older brother by 7 years, and so I was 22, 23 years old at the time, and he was 30-ish, and as an older brother would, he just kind of took the reins and said, "I'll deal with it, and I'll call you back." About 5 minutes later, I get a phone call back from my brother. He says, "Hey, man, I don't know how to tell you this, but Dad died this morning." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, it actually happened kind of in the middle of the night. He was driving down Fenton Road, which is in Flint, and this road gets really narrow. I can remember as a kid we would drive down it all the time because we used to go sledding on this hill, and it gets really narrow going under this bridge. Goes from 4 lanes, drops down to 2 lanes. I'm talking so narrow that if you weren't paying attention, you would swipe the car coming at you." And long story short, he was driving down that road in the middle of the night, and the lanes got narrow, and he had been drinking, and this is the only story we know. We don't know if someone ran him off the road. We don't know if he fell asleep. But he hit the bridge that he was going under. And he drove a little old Jeep Cherokee, and it basically just, it didn't explode, but I mean the car just disintegrated basically. And the ambulance driver said that he didn't die on the scene. He died on the way to the hospital. So he was still alive, but he didn't make it there. I remember getting this news on Thanksgiving morning, and I don't have emotions. Like, I didn't cry, but I was in shock. And the reason I have an advantage in business over most of you guys is because of my story, right? I always say this. People who come from really rough backgrounds, maybe they didn't have good parents, maybe they didn't have any money, they were dead broke, they were on welfare. Those people have a huge advantage over somebody who was living middle class, paid the bills every month. Maybe they didn't have a ton left over, but they paid the bills every month. Their 2 parents had a 9-to-5 job that paid decently. They had everything they needed. The broke guy, the guy with a rough background, every single time has an advantage over the middle class guy. Why? Because he's been through more. He's mentally tougher, right? He's physically tougher probably too. And in business, when you get beat the crap down by customers, when you're broke, when you don't know what to do, when crisis happens, when employees quit, when you have an insurance claim, when you can't get the phone to ring, there's 2 types of things that happen. One guy either quits or one guy perseveres. And I have an advantage over most people in business because I've already been through a bunch of hard crap, right? Like, most of the things that happen in business do not compare to what I've been through. And so because of that, it's just not that big of a deal to me. Somebody loses an employee who's never been through something hard, and they've got freaking 4 weeks of work backed up and they don't know what to do. That's a pretty stressful situation. It is for me too, trust me. But when you've been through stuff that's really hard, it just makes it pretty easy. And so I'm a big believer that people who grow up in a really wealthy family, I'm talking wealthy, They have an advantage because they probably already have a network of people that have a lot of money, are willing to do business with them. Maybe their parents were in business and they took it over, or maybe their parents are in business and they're starting their own. Now their parents are kind of pushing their network on them. Those people definitely have an advantage. But the people like myself who had maybe a little bit of a rough upbringing, right? My dad's side of the family, we have an advantage because I'm tougher than all those guys. Mentally tough. I can get beat up over and over and over and over and over again and still keep pushing forward. And so I want to talk to those of you guys that have maybe had problems in your life. Maybe you had great parents, but maybe you blew it. Maybe you went to jail. Maybe you got hooked on drugs. Maybe you made some bad career choices or whatever it was. You guys have an advantage. And I see too many people using their rough upbringing, their bad childhood as an excuse. It's not a freaking excuse. It's an advantage. And if I was some rich kid who grew up in some rich household with a bunch of money and I was saying this message, I would get where you could say, hey, Matt, F off. You don't know what I've been through. But there's a good chance I've been through more than most of you. And I'm standing here telling you right now that it's an advantage, not a disadvantage. Now, I don't wish that on my kids. I don't wish that on my friends, my family. I don't want anyone to have to grow up that way. But I'm saying if you got unlucky and grew up that way, it's an advantage. Ed Mylett says this. He says, things happen for you, not to you. I'm going to say it again. Things happen for you, not to you. That's powerful. If you can comprehend that and start to believe it and start to walk in that, you'll start winning. Because when you realize that when hard things happen, they don't happen to you, they happen for you. Almost always down the road, right? When you look back at a crisis, at a problem, at something major that happened in your life, you go, wow, like in the moment, that was really hard. But look what came out of it. So for those of you guys that maybe had it hard, or maybe you have it hard now, this is a wake-up call and an encouragement message to say, you have an advantage over everybody because you're mentally tough, you've been through more than most, and when hard times happen inside your business, you'll handle it better than anybody else.